Let's start with the question you're here for. Will Padel make it to the Olympics? Because right now, depending on who you ask, you'll hear two completely different stories. One says Padel is basically guaranteed to hit the Olympics, that it's just a matter of time. The other says the sport is still years away, maybe even at risk of missing its biggest window entirely. And the truth? It's complicated. More complicated than most fans realise. Because behind the scenes, the people who run Padel, the federations, the investors, the tours, the politicians, they're all moving quietly, strategically, and sometimes even in the opposite directions, all trying to shape whether Padel becomes an Olympic sport or not. So today I want to break down the real story, where the Olympic bid is actually at, the milestones Padel has hit, the ones it hasn't, and the timeline that genuinely matters, because the next few years will make or break Padel's Olympic dream. To understand where Padel's Olympic bid stands today, we need to understand where it actually began. Padel's Olympic story didn't start with hype or marketing. It started back in 1991, when Spain, Argentina and Uruguay created the International Padel Federation, the FIP. That was the first necessary building block. Without a global governing body, you don't even get a seat at the Olympic table. But let's be honest, for the next 2 decades the Olympic idea was fantasy. Padel was basically a beautiful secret shared between Spain and Argentina, addictive, social and ridiculously fun, but nowhere near global. Then the late 2010s hit. Courts started popping up everywhere. Italy, Sweden, the Middle East, Belgium, France, the UK. The sport went from a niche to a phenomenon. For the first time you could say Padel was a global sport. And then came the next major milestone. In 2019, the FIP received official recognition from the International Olympic Committee, or the IOC. That doesn't mean you're in the Olympics, but it means the IOC recognises the sport. Your governance and anti-doping meet their standards, and you're now on the Olympic pathway. Most sports never get this far. Padel did. So recognition was step 1. Step 2 is proving the sport actually works inside Olympic-style events, with scheduling, officiating, national representation, broadcasting, the whole ecosystem. And Padel moved fast. In 2023, the sport debuted at the European Games in Krakow, a temporary court in the middle of the city square, 3 medal events broadcast across the continent. For many people, this was the first time Padel looked truly big. But what happened next was even more important. Padel found its way into the South American Games, the Mediterranean Games, the Asian Beach Games, and now the big one, the Asian Games, starting in 2026. This happened because the Olympic Council of Asia formally recognised the FIP, a massive breakthrough. Asia is one of the IOC's most influential regions. If the Olympic Council of Asia backs you, the IOC listens. This wasn't luck, it was strategy. So how does a sport actually get added to the Olympics? Here's the simple version. The IOC has a hard limit on total athletes. No new sport gets added unless the IOC adds it to the permanent program, or the host city proposes it as an additional sport, like skateboarding and climbing in Tokyo. And all of these decisions happen years in advance, which is why Padel isn't at LA 2028. That decision has already been made. The next window is Brisbane 2032. But, and this is the important part, Padel has not been officially proposed or accepted yet. There's no public bid, no IOC vote, no confirmation. What we're seeing instead is positioning. A coordinated push to make Padel as attractive and as Olympic ready as possible. So who's driving this? First is the FIP. Under Luigi Carraro, the federation has been aggressively improving governance, expanding global membership, enforcing anti-doping, aligning the sport with IOC expectations. Love him or hate him, he's been pushing hard. Next is the professional tour. The merger of World Padel Tour and Premier Padel under Qatar Sports Investments changed everything. For the first time, Padel had one unified tour, one ranking, one rulebook, one global structure, and serious political and financial backing. The IOC hates fractured sports, and Padel solved that problem almost overnight. Then you've got the big European federations like Italy, France and the UK, all investing heavily in the sport. These organisations carry Olympic weight. And finally, there's Asia Pacific. Between the OCA recognition, the growth in the Gulf, and the Asia Pacific Padel Tour, Padel is building presence in a region the IOC deeply cares about. So put that all together and there's a real coordinated Olympic push happening behind the scenes. So where does the Olympic bid actually stand right now in late 2025? Let's start with what Padel has going for it. Multi-sport integration is strong. The OCA recognition is a huge credibility boost. The Pro Padel Tour is unified, global participation is rising quickly, gender balance is perfect, the sport is insanely TV friendly, the footprint is small and affordable, and culturally it hits the IOC's favourite buzzwords: youth, accessibility and growth. So on paper, Padel looks extremely attractive. But here are the gaps. Padel still hasn't been selected for any Olympic Games. Continental participation is uneven. Africa, India, Southeast Asia and parts of the US need more depth. The IOC is under major pressure to avoid increasing athlete quotas. And the timeline is tight. Brisbane 32 decisions need to be made around 2025-26. So here's the honest truth. Padel is close, closer than ever, but not over the finish line yet. Think of a sport standing in the final 30 metres of a 400 metre race. The stadium is roaring, you can see the finish tape, but you still need to push through. That's where Padel is right now. So how likely is Olympic Padel actually? Let's be transparent. Brisbane 2032. Possible. Not guaranteed, but absolutely within reach. 2036 and beyond. Very likely. Honestly, the long-term direction is obvious. This sport is too global, too accessible, too watchable, and too well-funded to be ignored forever. The real question, in my opinion, is timing. Now, what would Olympic inclusion actually do to the sport? This is where it gets interesting. If Padel becomes an Olympic sport, national funding blows up overnight. Governments suddenly have a reason to invest in coaching, youth development, talent ID, and national teams. The pro game becomes more structured and serious. Rankings, qualification paths, officiating, everything gets tightened. Visibility goes nuclear. Millions see Padel for the first time. Kids start asking for rackets. Sponsors dive in. More courts get built. But there's a risk. We've seen what happens when countries overbuild, Sweden being the clearest example. An Olympic announcement could trigger another wave of overinvestment unless the sport manages growth carefully. And culturally, Padel could shift. Right now, its magic is that it's fun, social, chaotic, and accessible. Olympic inclusion introduces pressure, performance pathways, and high-performance systems. It could be great, it could be complicated, but it would absolutely change the sport. So does Padel's Olympic bid fail or succeed? Here's my answer. It succeeds, eventually. Maybe not in Brisbane, maybe not on the timeline fans want. But structurally, politically, and globally, the direction of travel is only going one way. The governance is maturing, the tour is unified, participation is exploding around the world, and the sport is simply too good, too watchable for the IOC to ignore forever. So yes, the bid can stumble, it can miss the window, it could get delayed, but fail long term? No, I don't believe so. And that leads to the real question. When Padel finally does walk into the Olympic Village, is the sport ready for what comes next? Because that moment, whether it's 2032 or later, will divide the sport into before and after. Subscribe to the channel if you want to follow Padel's progress to the Olympics and beyond. See you next time.